I would like to introduce.
Okay, let's go.
WNTV online radio station. WNTV radio broadcasting flash with 24/7 all genres. WNTV radio, your urban music link.
It's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass.
It's the Really Charlie Podcast, making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine on the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast, making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine on the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast, making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine on the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast, making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine on the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast, making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine on the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast, making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine on the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast, making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine on the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast, making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine on the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast, making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine on the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast, making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine on the Really Charlie Podcast. Really Charlie Podcast. Making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine. On the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast. Making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine. On the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast. Making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine. On the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast. Making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine. On the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast. Making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine. On the Really Charlie Podcast. It's the Really Charlie Podcast. Making memories last. Your time, my time, we all shine. On the Really Charlie Podcast.
We're on there now. Look. And I can hear myself on here.
Yeah. All right.
I'll mute that.
I would like to introduce.
Okay, let's go.
No billboards, no online radio station.
WNB1 radio broadcasting flies with 4-7 music genres. WNB1 radio.
Your urban music link.
Hey. Welcome to the Really Charlie podcast. And we are here on WNB1 Radio. My guest today here is Phil Young from Achieve Greatness, 88.org. And we've been waiting for this. And as always, Murphy's Law, what will go wrong can't go wrong. Something like that, right? Right, Phil?
Yeah, you got it, man.
I'm very happy to have you here. This second time we talked, a couple of other times on the fentanyl facts and stories with Paula, and I like having you on as a guest. I like having conversations with you because y'all one of those dudes. Y'all one of the genuine dudes that I've known, and it's just good to do this. And I like doing the weekly podcast in memory of Andrew, your son. And I'm going to continue to do that. As long as we are doing it together, I'm going to continue to do it. That podcast is not going to go anywhere. It's going to be a part of my life as long as I can keep it going. All right.
Yes, man.
All right.
Appreciate that, bro.
Yeah.
Means a lot. And I enjoyed having the conversations with you as well. And you've been a real G ever since the time I met you. So we're already family too.
Yes, exactly.
We're family through my son, Mary, and your niece. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we tell him that we're gonna change his name. So.
I know he tells me that.
We tease him all the time. And no offense to your name, we just kind of messing with him, getting.
Dude, we're old school.
Yeah,
we do. We bust chops.
Yeah, definitely. This is something that's very important that you and I are going to talk about, and I just kind of want to make sure that everyone's kind of listening to what Phil's going to say, and actually it's real important. For one, he's in a situation that some of us are not in. He lost someone very dear to him, and I want to talk about those things. So that's why we're here. So. All right, Phil, it's the floor. What's behind your brainstorm? What are you trying to do?
Well, I think it's important to be able to communicate to other dads. Doesn't mean that I discount anybody else who's lost, but what I've noticed since the bomb detonated in our lives was, including myself, just not very open to discussing death, dealing with the situation afterwards. And basically, I'm an older guy, so we grew up kind of when you bury someone, you kind of bury your feelings at the same time.
Right.
And shortly after Andrew passed, I realized that I needed to pivot.
Mm-hmm.
And by pivoting, I meant rather than burying my feelings and hiding and trying to avoid the subject, I decided, and I made Paula a promise that I would deal with it head on. Now, I'm going to tell you, there were a lot of things that happened prior to that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, Paula and I, we're very open with each other. But at that time, how do you deal with that?
True.
How do you deal with one of your children passing? And the decorated history that Andrew and I had, and even Andrew and P.
Yeah.
But we started really communicate. We were able to talk, and I told you that story. That was primarily because Brandon had reached out to me. I reached out to Brandon, and he gave me some advice. And those of you who don't know, Brandon is my older son who had gone through some very well advertised mental health issues that he shared on one of Charlie's podcasts. So I'm not saying anything that he hasn't already mentioned in the past. But talking to him, man, it changed the narrative. And I realized that if I didn't make certain changes, Paula and I were not going to stay together.
Yeah.
So from a male standpoint, we are protectors, right? Doesn't matter what my issues are with my children. Me and all 5 of my boys, we've had issues, right?
Mhm.
And so at some point in time, you just pray that you're able to eliminate those issues and move on with your life, because life is just too short. And unfortunately, Andrew and I had just reconciled when he passed from marijuana that was laced with fentanyl. And the only way I can describe this is somebody dropped an atomic bomb in my home, and I watched my family go into pieces, primarily my wife.
Yes.
And so the way I describe it to people is I'm picking up pieces of Paula,
Mhm.
and she is shattered. And me being a protector, now I'm dealing with things internally that I'm not sharing with anybody.
Mhm.
And this is the point of this
Yes.
tonight, because it's important that we do share as men what we're dealing with and going through, and we don't have that outlet. I was the first person on a podcast, Anthony's Angels, and Anthony brought us. I think you actually had him on here.
Yes.
I was the first male on his show, and he had been doing podcasts for 4 years.
Wow.
And I was able to share some of the things that I think we as men go through, and it resonated with a lot of the women on the show, because I saw who was listening.
Mhm.
And that touched me, because it made me even more cognizant of the fact that if we don't talk as men, and if we don't share with our significant other or our wives, they're not going to know, because in their mind, we don't want to talk about it because we want to move on.
Yeah.
But that couldn't be further from the truth.
So
What was happening is I felt like a failure.
Mm.
I had not only let my son down, like I said, don't matter what my issues are with him, still my son.
Yeah.
And so I let him down. I let my wife down. I let myself down. So I'm dealing with mental stuff that's attacking me every night. Every damn night I'm going through it. And I remember when they had sent so Andrew had passed away. He was in Maryland, so we had to have his body transported up here. And I'm going to keep this raw, so I know it might impact people, but
you should.
You gotta hear this. I wanted to keep Paula from the funeral home, so my goal was to go to the funeral home, pick out the casket that I thought best represented Andrew, and I went with his brother Adam, Frankie, and then Brandon came as well. And I'm gonna tell you something, man. It was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. And I had already suffered what I call catastrophic loss, because my mother had passed away in 2008. Before that, many years before, my cousin David got killed in a horrific car accident. My uncle Johnny, who I was close to, he died in a car accident. Johnny Mars, So it's just like one after another. And each time I just kept burying stuff, saying, I'm not going to deal with it, because I'm never going to get that close to somebody where I can get hurt. But now I'm watching my wife. Dude, she would cry every night. She still does.
Yes.
And her cries actually just made my soul tremble. That's the only way I can explain it. And I said, if I kept praying, and I was like, Lord, you need to show me what to do.
Yes.
And what to say. So the first thing was, don't say anything. Just shut up.
Yeah.
Don't be a usual man. Just be quiet and be strong. The quiet part was easy. The strong part wasn't so much easy. It was difficult because, like I said, I feel like a failure, and Paula's saying things that are freaking me out.
Yeah.
Like she wants to go to the cemetery and dig up Andrew's grave and hug him.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, what in the hell is going on?
Yeah.
And so it really showed me that I think that when you suffer that type of loss, you experience PTSD.
Yeah.
So you're going through post-traumatic stress disorder, and you don't know how to deal with it. So I decided to talk to Paula. We were having a lot of arguments, not major arguments, but just she wanted to go to the cemetery. I didn't.
Yeah.
Took me 8 years to go see my mother
Mm-hmm.
in her grave. And even then, I don't go all the time. Andrew's across the street from the school he went to, right across from Boat in Pine
Mhm.
Grove, which is about 2 miles from my house. And so I decided to do everything opposite of what I was taught.
Mm.
And what I did in order to navigate through this, I went and talked to Paula and I said, okay, you need to hear me out. And this is not anything negative. This is not to hurt you. I have been raised a certain way.
Mm.
And that means I've been taught that way.
Yes.
So now I have to unteach myself and learn a new way.
Back to school.
And
Right.
that was the beginning of the change in our relationship, because I said, no longer will I avoid. If she wanted to go to the cemetery, I'm going to go with her.
Mm.
If she wants to do whatever she wants to do, I'm going to do it. But that's easier said than done,
Yes.
right? Because at the same time, Paula's not working, so I have to pay the mortgage, pay everything, pay the bills, keep working. I actually changed jobs.
Mm.
And my CEO of the company I work with now, when I told him what had happened and I was going through interviews after dealing with this catastrophe, he looked at me and goes, you got to be effing kidding me.
Yeah.
You came and interviewed and you had just lost your son.
Yeah.
And so I started telling the story to everybody, right? Not to get pity, right? I want to educate people. Our whole purpose, once Paula and I started correcting ourselves as best we could, because I tell it people, we're not moving on, we're carrying on, because we're
Yes.
carrying on Andrew's memory and legacy. And one of the things that he liked to do is what I always did, which was play basketball, teach basketball, coach basketball. Imitation is the best form of flattery.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
but what I wanted to make sure it was important that when a man doesn't talk, it doesn't mean he doesn't care.
True.
It doesn't mean that he doesn't want to talk about his son, doesn't want to talk to his woman. What I was dealing with, I can't speak for all men, is I was dealing with what I considered not only a catastrophic nightmare to be in, but a catastrophic failure.
Yes.
I felt like a failure. I let everybody down who depended on me. And as a person who wants to protect somebody, I couldn't protect. And so that loss of life, it was like a gut punch and a face punch. It's just a whole body punch, man. I didn't know what to do. And so every night, unbeknownst to Paula, when Andrew's belongings came back, I had my finished basement, so I had all his stuff down there, and I went through it. And as I went through it, I just cried. I cried. That's how I dealt with it. And dude, I don't want people to think you have to be macho to deal with death. You deal with death, and when you lose somebody, you don't stop talking about them. You keep their memory
Mm-hmm.
alive.
Yes.
And so, yeah, they weren't always great memories, but once I started looking, first of all, Andrew's no longer here.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever BS we had gone through, it's gone. It's done. Now I have to grasp what I remembered that made me laugh, the jokes. He's the first son that took me to a baseball game.
Wow.
For Father's Day. And that stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
He had a good heart, and he just didn't know how to always communicate. But as we found out later, he had his own mental health issues that he was dealing with. He had been in 2 horrific car accidents, one of which I don't even know how he survived. And he was afraid to drive. So he had lost a lot of his independence because of, those accidents and things that he had just been through in his life. I started to understand that better, but we never got a chance to continue to talk about it. On March 8th, 2022, he passed away, and he had marijuana that was laced with fentanyl. And people tried to tell me and Paula that wasn't possible. That's not true. You guys are making it up. And so I spoke to the detective on scene. There was no trauma. There was nothing. Next to Andrew's body was a partially smoked blunt. And if you knew Andrew, you knew he would smoke the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, after tests and everything, finally, after months waiting, we got the news. But we knew Andrew hated pills. He hated needles. I'm sure that, he liked to smoke, just like a lot of people like to smoke. A couple of my other kids love to smoke. I don't.
Yeah.
But that's them. That's what they want to do. I just tell people, just, get it from a dispensary.
Yeah, so true.
Because we just don't know what people are giving out there. And now it's just fentanyl is everywhere. And so we decided through our grief to try to figure out what could we do to carry on. And that's how we came up with Achieve Greatness. Achieve Greatness actually was started by Andrew. It was, he started the company. I have sketches of when he was creating the logo.
Wow.
And so eventually we'd like to put that on the website, kind of the story.
Yeah.
And Paula's actually run into a couple of people at events that she done that actually knew Andrew and remember when he was working on the logo. So it's kind of crazy. And we'd like to get their story too, kind of put it in a little video because it was all about ball. And if people don't know, but basketball, when I met Paula, I had 2 boys from prior relationships. Paula had 3. So we became a blended family.
Yes.
Andrew most people say, well, that's your stepson, but I never look at any of the kids' step. I always looked at them as my sons.
I agree. I'm right there. Same. I'm in the same lane as you. That's the way I consider my children, because I wouldn't do anything other than let me see. God, I wouldn't do anything more for anybody else than. All right. Go ahead. Continue your story there, Phil.
I want to just say to Jacques Nagia,
yes,
my boy Austin, what's up, man? And I see that. Thank you, Laurel. And I'm sorry I saw another message up there where somebody had lost their child.
Yeah,
to
Jack did
fentanyl.
Yeah.
And I'm like, good grief. It is it's something that people don't want to talk about. Paula and I are trying to get into the schools, especially Paula. She is like on a mission from God himself. And so she's made a lot of connections in the area. She's been able to get into to different venues to discuss it. And, she won a humanitarian award a couple of weeks ago from the city. So we're doing a lot of work. And we couldn't do it without a lot of local people here that have been helping us out, including yourself.
Yep.
We got Marcus and Isaiah Houtman. We have people on our board, including Rob Delalue, who's local, and just a lot of other people that have reached out to us. Steve Burgo, we've actually partnered with the DJ Henry Dream Fund, and they lost their son back in 2010 to, unfortunately, police violence, and they started a nonprofit. And so they partnered with us and have been giving us some great advice and also a great avenue into to getting into some areas that we probably couldn't get in before. But back to the grief part, man. So the thing is, it doesn't end. It's a daily occurrence. I have Andrew's picture on my bureau with a couple of, not real candles, fake candles. I light them up at night. And I look and go, Paula doesn't even know this, but I just look and say, hey, I'm sorry, man. I didn't know all the crap that you were really going through. And because I was raised a different way, my thing was always man up, right? That's what you tell people, right?
I said the same thing.
And sometimes people don't know how to do that. They don't know what it means, or they're just not mentally in that place to be able to do it. I've gone through a lot of hell in my life, and I've been able to come out of it. But I remember having a conversation with Drew, and he's like, "How do you do it? How did you get through the things you got through?" And I always said I was just look in the mirror, and a lot of the places I ended up being were because of stupid choices that I made.
Mm-hmm.
So I stopped making stupid choices.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you have to first realize that the commonality of everything that you're going through is usually you,
Yeah.
right? So that's where I started many moons ago. And again, but with me, man, I've always been able to I'll overanalyze stuff, but to the point where when I start to do it, I understand some of the issues or some of the areas of improvement that I need. I don't look at anybody else to improve. I just try to improve me.
It's so saying, trying to be a better man than I was yesterday, and it's so true. Sometimes, well, my training was always calm yourself down, right? And that goes with emotion and everything. You got to control your own emotion before you try to control someone else. And that's what I have always tried to do. It's very, very important. The the one thing that I've noticed that, you know, and it's expected that this is definitely hit you hard. And with Paula, it's hit her hard. How do you adjust when you're going outside you two, to someone else may be dealing with something that, decided to be quiet. And along with all the grief and the emotion that you're going through, how do you help someone else out in your family or even a close friend of Andrew's?
I think you just have to, it's a biblical principle,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have to die to yourself. And what I mean by that is you kind of take your feelings and put them off to the side because you know that for the betterment of others, you can probably make a difference. If nothing else, just to be able to lend an ear and talk. So Paul and I have taken our grief and what we go through. Doesn't mean we still don't do it. Doesn't mean when we're home, she's not crying or I'm not downstairs crying or thinking about something. But it's almost like it's a calling for us, man. We're able to take that and channel it and lend an ear to somebody and